All right, folks, we are back with more Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising action for you here, and so this is a video that I wanted to make for a little bit. I had some ideas floating around. It's we're going to talk about risk reward today. We're going to talk about how to, I suppose, properly guess in fighting games. Right? It sounds like it's just guessing, right? But no, there are educated guesses, and there are ways to do those calculations there to figure out why, when, and how, and why to mash, to jump, to block. To call someone out on fake pressure or whatever, because obviously, none of us are mind readers. It's going to be difficult for you to know exactly what your opponent's going to do. In fact, you never, ever will be right most of the time, and that's not what good players do, is not just read their opponent's mind, right? Being a consistently strong fighting game player, realistically, comes down to this. It comes down to playing in such a way that your risk-reward is maximized in your favor most often, right? It may sound a little bit disillusioning in a way, but fighting games at their core, right, at a certain point, yes, there's mind games and everything, but even still, that is a guessing game, right? It's a guessing game. There are very few moments where it's a true checkmate, or there's nothing you can do here. There's always multiple different options your opponent could do, and you just have it's all about figuring out what they are most likely to do, but also, ignoring, not playing solitaire necessarily, but just ignoring knowing what they're going to do. What is the safest thing for you to do? So we'll get into it in a little bit more detail, but that's kind of going to be the general outline of this here video here. Hopefully, if I remember correctly, I'll have timestamps below there in the little bar. You can go around and move around and see where everything is. I guess just starting off at the most beginner. Goddamn, sorry, my words escaped me. Beginner, sort of basic level, right? So you may have heard of the idea of RPS in a fighting game, right? Rock paper scissors is what that's short for. And there's the idea of for example, I don't know, it's Granblue, right? So let's do the Granblue thing, right? If I 6XL at Sora's and he blocks it, there are a number of things that I can do for here, but I guess let's pick 3 options just so that we can keep with the RPS example, just like rock, paper, scissors. So when I 6XL at him, there's a few things I can do, a few things he can do. Let's focus on what I, as the attacker, can do. 1, I can do it again, right? This maintains my plus strengths, right? And it keeps my pressure going, but there's a gap here, right? So he could theoretically, if he knew that this was going to happen, he could mash on this and he would win, right? Or I can immediately hit a light button, or I mean, some people they can hit a medium button and get a pretty Ladiva doesn't get a whole lot off for a 6XL, but you can if this counter hits, basically this will be pretty good, right? So this, he can't mash on this, he has to just respect this. But eventually, also this is the kind of thing that will just push me out of my pressure eventually, right? I either have to spend cooldowns or something. You can't just keep pressuring someone forever for free, basically, right? And then there's also I can just leave a delay up and maybe say walk up, throw him, right? Obviously in Ladiva's case, right? Just SPD him, command grab, right? So let's say those are sort of our 3 options right there, right? Yeah, sure. Well, I guess the command grab, and the other 6XL are kind of similar, but let's go with it for now. The people hear RPS sometimes, and I think there's a little bit of it's a good way to describe things, but it is very different. Fighting games are very different from actual proper rock paper scissors in one very notable way, and that is that the options are not all equally dangerous or equally likely to happen or equally valuable, right? So for example, right, if I'm doing, say, for Sora's here, his options, for example, are maybe he can block, he can sit there and block, he can mash, or he can DP. Maybe let's call that his big nuclear option, right? So even though those are 3 options, and that's rock paper scissors, and I'm kind of guessing one of the 3, realistically, him just if he thinks him just choosing to block, essentially, right, is going to be his safest option, and most of the time, nothing really bad is going to happen to him for doing that, outside of very weird specific circumstances. Ladiva's different, okay? Ladiva's different because he can't block this, right? So Ladiva's a bit of a bad example for this. But him just blocking here, overall, is relatively safe for him, but he gets no reward, right? There's not really any risk, there's not really any reward. Obviously against Ladiva, not the case, but just ignore it for a second. Ignore one of 3 characters with the command grab for a second here. But for example, him mashing, say he thinks I'm either going to do, if he thinks I'm going to do this, right, 6XL and 6XL, or if he thinks I'm going to do 6XL into grab, for example. Mashing will be both of these. Let's actually get him counter-attacking. Sora's, his far L is 7 frames, and it's kind of poopy for mashing out of stuff, so let's do 2L instead, right, yeah. So if I do 6XL and 6XL, he's I'm going to get counter hit right there, and if I try and grab him, I'm also going to get counter hit. So mashing works out pretty well there, right, but the problem with mashing, right, is that it is actually, in a lot of ways, the riskiest option for him to do, right? Because if he gets wrong, right, and I'm actually going to go in and do, the immediate button to catch that mashing, he takes 8,000 damage, right? It could even be more, right? Ladiva is from that standpoint where she is right there. She can't get super great counter hits, right? But I mean, it's still, that's a good 8,600. That's a good half. Even Sora's was extra HP. It's a good half of his HP gone right there for mashing. Whereas let's say even take into account the fact that Ladiva is this grappler who you can't just block against, right? Even still, if he just sits there and blocks, so let's have him not do that anymore. If he just sits there and blocks, right, he takes I mean, this is what, 2300? Yeah, 2300 if it's not technical input, like 2530 if it is technical input, right? So this is where you'll hear a lot of the times people talking about the idea of just like take the throw in fighting games. Tends to be something that's pretty common. Not as common in Granblue because you can throw tech pretty easily in this game, though there's counters to that for sure. You can watch the corner offense, defense guide and all that. I won't go too deeply. I'm going to assume that I'm going to not talk about it in great depth. I'm going to kind of assume that you know the general flow of offense and defense in this game, in this video. If you need a refresher, I put out a video there about corner offense, defense. Maybe I'll link it in the description. It's kind of the basic flow of the back and forth of defending and attacking in this game. But anyway, yeah, so take the throw isn't as applicable in something like Granblue as it is maybe like Street Fighter or something like that, where throws are much more threatening and a lot harder to stop. Right, but still, it applies. Ladiva is, you know what? Maybe Ladiva is a great example of this. I changed my mind because Ladiva, you have to either, you have to commit. You have to one way or the other try to beat strike or try to beat throw. Say you're right. Say we're in this exact situation, right? Against this might be so obvious. Some of you, we'll get into some slightly more advanced stuff as we go here. As I like to usually kind of grade these from sort of beginner to intermediate to, I don't know if there's too much to talk about on like an expert level here. It's just more of a concept, but yeah. So let's actually have Sora's on Wake Up. Let's have him do nothing for now, but yeah, let's have one possible thing where he does like a close out, right? Sure. And then the other action 2 will be none. Let's have him do none for now, right? So on Wake Up, say you get hit by Ladiva's SPD, right? He can either strike, right? Or he can throw. And there's a couple, obviously we're simplifying a little bit here, but this is the basic 50-50, right? Is he gonna command grab you? And it's like, is he gonna command grab you again, or is he gonna strike you on Wake Up? Now, if he command grabs you again, you just take 2300 damage. Yes, you're back in the same situation, right? But the same thing happens if you get struck. It also looks back in the same situation. Whereas, if you try and get out of the command grab, or you try to mash out of it. So if I know he's gonna mash on a Wake Up, right? Suddenly, or I can do something like this, and this is a lot more than 2300 damage for trying to mash out of the throw, right? So this should be. I think this is a fairly straightforward idea just to get us started here of just like risk reward, right? Not every option is created equal. Right, like mashing on the command grab could get you out of the corner for sure, or you could take. I mean, this is kind of an extreme example, but you could take 11,000 damage on 3 BP, right? This is almost a TOD actually, if you had no BP, right? So that's a lot of damage versus just taking the throw and taking 2300. So one, right? Let's have him not do that anymore. So let's do some basic math here. Follow. Wait. Come with me for a second here, right? One throw is 2300. 2 throws, 4600. 3 throws is 6900. 4 throws is 9,200. That's my math's correct there. 5 throws is 11,500. After 5 command grabs, finally we have eclipsed the risk. Like at that point, it is riskier to take 5 command grabs than it is to mash once. Right? So that's what it's a bit of an extreme example, but that's where people say like, oh yeah, just take the throw like within reason, just take the throw because getting to be fair now, medium command grab for Ladiva changed this a little bit because in the corner it'll do 400 more damage, but still like 4 throws is equivalent to 1 match, right? So that's when people talk about take the throw. That's what they mean. Is that yeah, obviously you don't want to you don't want to get thrown, but it is much safer if you don't know what to do. If you don't have a hard read on your opponents, or you don't have a good read on their habits, it is much safer to just take 2300 damage instead of risking taking 11,000. Right? And there are lots of situations in this game that are like that, and throw tends to be, even with characters that aren't Ladiva, right? Throws about 2,500 damage. Characters can do much bigger damage to you for getting hits. So that's what people talk about taking the throw, and that's a classic example of risk reward, right? But when I say this, though, that's not to say that you always just have to do the safest thing at all times in fighting games. That's a great way to lose. Like, if I know, this is where the mind games come in. If I know that you're thinking, oh, just take the throw, I mean, why would I ever stop doing this, right? Don't I just grab you until you die, right? Like, at a certain point, you have to take the risk. I'm not saying just, like, never, ever, ever do anything risky. But in fact, quite the opposite. Risk is necessary in fighting games, right? I'm just saying make sure that risk is calculated and make sure you're not that bad at math. Right? When I say risk is necessary in fighting games, we can look at it from the offensive standpoint too. Ladiva is another, very simple example of this, I suppose. Yes, other characters structure their offense differently, but Ladiva's offense is much more simpler at a baseline level, so I think it's a good example for this. Ladiva can basically not pressure you very well at all unless she takes a risk, and most characters are like this, right? Like if I'm just doing this over and over, right? Okay, well let's not have Sora's. Assume Sora's is not just mashing, right? Say he's being a good boy and he's like sitting back. Let me get fast cooldown enabled on my ass too. Give me 1 second here. Skill cooldown. There you go. Excuse me, fast cooldown. So like, if I'm just doing this, right? This is pretty nice and safe. There's not really many gaps here. I mean, like that. There's a gap right there, sure. But like, yeah, if I'm just like always only ever doing stuff that's like relatively safe, but Sora's is not gonna match here. It's not gonna do anything. So like I mean, eventually he'll die to chip, I guess. I mean, that wasn't even very safe, yeah. But you get the idea, right? Like eventually he'll die to chip, I suppose. But like, safe pressure doesn't do anything, right? Fighting games are in fact designed with the idea that you have to take risk into account. When I say this, for example, this was a very strong situation right here, as we talked earlier, but to get you here, I have to take a risk, right? That risk being that I have to command grab, right? Yes, this is great, but if you jump this, you get a full combo on me, right? If you mash on this, you get a full combo on me for me trying to run my offense. So it's a high risk, high reward option, and that's what makes a character like, when you hear people talk about Lydiva being maybe a volatile character, or like even though Lydiva can be very strong, why a lot of people don't really see her as like a very high tier character, is because she's inconsistent, right? When Lydiva gets what she wants to get off, it's insane. She steamrolls you, right? But also Lydiva can just like command grab once, and it just so happened that you guessed command grab that time, right? You jump it, you get a full combo on her ass. If you're one of the characters with better corner carry or something, you take her corner to corner, and then she's in the corner, and she has bad defense, and she dies, right? But again, the point is that she has to take a risk to actually get her offense started. Not even command grab, right? Say we're not even going to involve command grab at all. This is more so of a regular sort of pressure sequence for the game, right? I 6XL you, like just doing this, right? Like this is, well, first, I mean, there's gaps here, but it's doing like 6XL, like this one thing here, 6XL into that, right? This is good if I think you're going to take a risk, but realistically, just doing this, this was the blocking, right? There's nothing, there you have no reason to match if you know that this is all I'm going to do. Right? This doesn't even do chip. We were talking earlier. This doesn't even do chip damage, right? Like, there's no reason. This is completely fake, right? I think a lot of people sometimes just be like, oh, they keep like staggering the pressure. What do I do? It's so much stagger pressure. It doesn't do anything, man. Just block until they actually commit to something, right? For example, say I wanted to actually, like, I'm like, oh, this guy's blocking a lot. Okay, so now I'm gonna walk up a little bit longer and throw him, right? That's a risk for me again, because like I mentioned earlier, if I walk up here, Soras can mash on me, right? If I'm walking up here, he can mash on me and you know, get a full combo, get out of the corner, right? Say instead I'm like, okay, well I think instead he's gonna try and delay tech, right? So I'm gonna walk up and close H. That's again like a big slow button. You can like back throw me out of it, possibly, right? You can back throw me into the corner, and then it's back throw incident, and I'm dead, right? Like this is one of the ways that things can go really bad for you really fast in this game. Is you walk up to delay something on someone and they immediately throw your ass, right? Now you're in the corner. Of course, they're taking a risk by doing that too, right? But the point is, you can't really do anything that is actually threatening to your opponent until you take a risk. Options that are incredibly safe and also have any chance of opening up your opponent tends to be overpowered, tend to be broken, right? It tends to just be like that. That is one of the things that makes a move in fighting games incredibly strong, is if it is both safe and threatening, right? Most moves that are safe are not threatening by design, right? In fact, it is usually the case that if a move is both safe and threatening, something has gone wrong, right? Like, what's even a good example of this, man? Like, maybe you could argue that like some of the moves that here's a great example of it, right? This is also not like fully safe, right? But it's something that a lot of people are going to be familiar with, I think, and it's something that we can at least use as like, it's not like perfectly safe, right? But it's this idea, right, of like, excuse me, this move right here, right? This one, right? This move is plus 27 on block. That's right, you didn't get that wrong. This move is plus 27 on block for Nier. It's not punishable on spot dodge most of the time, right? Because you're so far away from her, right? It leads to a full combo on hit, and jumping over this works, but is risky, right? This is, for my money, the best ultimate skill in the game, right? And the main reason for that, if not the best, it's way up there, and like, you know, if this isn't the best ultimate skill in the game, this is, right? But I think 2-2U, Nier's 2-2U is a lot better. Why is that move so good? It's because it is both quite safe for Nier, it's fast, right? It's not unreactable, but it's damn close, and it's not punishable, and it's plus 27 on block. You can't spot dodge it. If you spot dodge, you're not going to punish. Most of the time, even point blank in her face, right? And it leads to full reward on it, so it is both safe and threatening, right? So, but most of the time, fighting games are not built like this, right? That move is a little too good, and it's one of the many reasons that Nier, despite her the rather significant nerfs that she got, she's still very strong, is because she has some very safe and threatening moves like that. But most of the time, right? You got to take risks. You got to take risks in fighting games to open people up. So, how do we balance this then? So we know that, you know, there are cases in the game where the risk is very heavily skewed against you, right? But you still need to take risks or else you just die. What if you're not taking risks on offense, right? You're just doing nothing. If you're not taking risks on offense, you're just literally doing nothing. There's no reason for your opponent to ever stop blocking, right? And eventually, it is impossible to keep up. Like, you notice, all I'm doing is this, right? Because it is impossible to keep up risk-free pressure forever in fighting games. Like if I even this is a gap now, right? Doing this like this, yes, it's infinite. Whoa, no, there's a gap. There's a gap between the far L and the 6XL, right? You can match on this. So this is like the only safe risk-free pressure you can do. Basically requires either it's very short like this, right? Like 6XL into far L, or it requires cooldowns, right? Like Soras can do something like this or something like that, right? You can go. Soras is a good example of like he's got a ton of plus frames all over the place. Let me get fast cooldowns on him too. There you go. But yeah, Soras, like he's got lots of plus frames all over the place, right? So you can do something like this, right? And like all of that was safe, right? There was nothing the Lodiva could really do there besides like DP in the middle. That's a whole other thing, right? So like that was all safe pressure, but I can't do that forever, right? That cost me cooldowns, right? Now they're well, fast cooldown, yes, but they're gone for a little bit, right? When I use those EX moves, and then his non-EX moves very explicitly are designed to not be infinite safe pressure, right? This is plus on block, sure, but it has 28 frames of startup, so it's spot dodge where you can match on it. This one's quick, it's minus on block, right? The Lodiva's frame data is showing up there, so when it says +3, Lodiva is +3, Swords is -3, right? So it's again, this is relatively basic, but it's just a fundamental concept of like you can't do safe pressure forever in fighting games. It doesn't do anything by design, and also you got to take risks on defense eventually too, though, right? Or you just die, as we saw with the command grab example. So how do we do this, right? There are sort of 3 main things that determine how and when to take risk, in my opinion, right? We'll go over them one by one, but I'll state them here, right? One, it's just raw math, right? Raw expected value calculations of like what are the how much damage I'm going to do / take depending on where you are, right? If I do this on average, right? That you can do that. That's very basic. That's like your level 1. That's how you flowchart, right? We'll get into that in a second. Number 2 is risk reward changes heavily based on the game states, which we'll get into. And number 3, which is the sort of highest level of playing fighting games, is risk reward changes heavily based on your opponent, right? Again, this is where it actually is like rock, paper, scissors. People have habits, right? People are like, for example, there are going to be Lodiva players that command grab more often and Lodiva players that strike more often. The number one thing, for playing this mind game with your opponents is trying to remain unpredictable. But if you can find a pattern in your opponent, right? Then that also completely changes how you're doing your calculations. So those are sort of in ascending order of, I guess, depth of playing the game, right? So start at level 1. This is like the basic just flowchart. I have no idea about that. We just started, like it's round start, or it's the first interaction or something like that. We both have like full health, full brave points, no meter, right? And we're like, what do I do? At some point, I haven't had a chance to gather information on my opponent yet, right? I have to do something. And this is where we just talk about the basics, right? When we already sort of went over this. Say your Sora is right now, and you're defending against Lodiva. This works for offense too, but the defending example is much simpler because your options are more limited on defense, right? That's why being on the defense in the corner it's one of the fundamental reasons it's a bad thing. It's because your options are limited. Lodiva here can do a lot more than Sora's can, right? Sora's basically has to either take a massive risk or just sit here blocking and/or jumping for his life, right? His options are limited, and that's why being in the corner is bad. But so with that in mind, let's talk about Sora's in the corner here and his options, as it's a more simple scenario to go through. So you kind of talked to this already, right? Getting command grabbed is 2,300 damage. Getting counter hit close H is 11,000 damage. So the raw expected value calculation, the level 0 flowchart, the simplest way of conducting ourselves playing this fighting game, will tell us that on average, for every 4 times we get thrown, we should mash once or jump once, right? So because taking 4 throws is less damage than getting counter hit once, right? Now it might sound a little absurd to you. It's because it is. This is the most basic, like most rudimentary way to do this calculation, but it's better than nothing, right? This is still going to be much better. So say you half the time you mashed and half the time you jumped. You're just completely going at random, right? You're going to take much more, like say your opponent did roughly the same thing, right? If you like half the time they did command grab, half the time they did strike. On average, right, you're going to take 5,500 damage from the half of 11,000, right, half the time, and you're going to take 2,300 damage half the time. So you're going to take about it will be a weighted average of those two, right? So basically, it will be 1150 plus 5,500. Don't worry about the math too much, but you're taking about 6,600, 6,700 damage on average, right? Versus, right, if you're getting thrown 4 times and getting close, or you're guessing throw on defense 4 times and matching once, right? It's going to be about 2,300 and 2,300, basically, right? Ignore the math for a second. I guess the math's important. No, listen. I know some people don't like numbers, but just bear with me for a second here, right? So if you weighted averages, right? If you're you're getting thrown 4 times for every 1 time that you are guessing command grab, right? And say your opponent is doing a roughly equal percentage of that too. They're command grabbing, 4 times as often as they're striking, right? In that case, you're taking 2,300 times 0.8 plus 11,000 times 0.2 that damage on average. We don't have to do that exact math, but again, it works out to be in the realm of 4,500 damage, right? Versus the one we did before, where you're doing half, like 50-50, where you're just going willy-nilly, right? That gets you to around 7,000 damage, right? So you can see how actually taking into account your opponent's options and how damaging they are cuts the damage you take significantly. You might be like, what the hell, getting thrown 4 times, like for every 1 time that I match? That's insane. No, it's actually a much safer way to play the video game against Lodiva, right? Than just guessing at random, right? You're taking almost double the damage in some cases if you're mashing, right? If you're just doing it at random, half the time you're mashing, half the time you're jumping, or sorry, half the time you're mashing, half the time you're blocking, right? So that's the most basic level. I'm gonna put some, hopefully I'll put some numbers up on screen there because I know, visual aids can help for people sometimes. But so that's the most basic level 1 thing of just, do the raw math, right? And this requires some knowledge of your opponent's character when you're defending, right? It also, for me, for example, if I'm playing the Grappler, right, I'm doing a similar thing, right? Where I'm thinking, right, if we're assuming we're just doing level 0 basic stuff, right? I'm thinking like, okay, well, my command grab is a lot less rewarding than my strike, right? So I want to do my strike more often, right? Now, even just saying that sentence already, I want to like follow up with like, but you know that, so you're gonna do X and Y, so I'm gonna, but no, so actually for me, baseline, I want to strike more often than I grab, right? And you see how this sort of inverts itself now. I want to do my high risk, my high reward option more often. You want to avoid my high reward option more often. It's kind of a line, right? Because if I'm gonna strike you more often, because it's more damage, I'm gonna strike about 4 times for every 1 time that I grab. Right? So if you're just taking the throw, it means you're blocking. So I'm gonna strike 4 times as often as I grab. You're gonna block 4 times as often as you mash. You see how it kind of intersects there, right? I'm doing my highest reward thing. You're doing your least risk thing, right? So it ends up working out pretty well for you on defense. And for me, it's also still the best reward I can get, right? Is striking more often because it's 5 times as much damage as the command grab. So that's level 1, right? That's level 0. Where like that's not even. It even sounds weird to even say because it's so fundamental to the video game to play the game state and play the opponents that just saying, oh, let's do some math feels wrong. But that's where we all start. That knowledge is what's going to then allow us to think about, the phase 2 and phase 3. So let's talk about phase 2. Taking game state into account, right? So again, this is a great example, right? This is right here. What we have right here is a wonderful example of game state completely flipping everything on its head, right? This is one of the most extreme examples, but it happens a lot, right? Right now, Soares is in the corner. Like, ignore the fact that he has 3 brave points at 100 meter. Doesn't matter for you right now. But he's in the corner, and he's got almost no health, right? You know what this means? Is suddenly all of that math we were doing earlier completely useless, right? Who cares? It's only 2,300 damage. It's 1,100 damage. Right now, it's a 50-50, right? This kills you. It doesn't do it because of the training mode, right? But he's dead right there. And he's also dead if he gets struck. So suddenly, that entire risk, all this stuff that I've been harping about for, like, the past 10 minutes, completely out the window. Now you're just in a horrible situation, right? And this is why being low on HP is, again, this sounds almost so simple it's not worth mentioning, but these are the fundamental concepts that everyone is playing in mind with that nobody really talks about, so I want to make sure that they're just, like, stated openly. This is why being low on HP is a bad thing, right? Like, that's why it doesn't... you might think, like, oh, well, having 1 HP is the same as having 1,000 HP because I'm still alive, I can still fight, right? And while, yes, that's true, your character doesn't do, like, less damage at low HP or anything, having HP is a resource. Right? HP is a resource that you use to play the video game, and when you have less HP, you can't play in the same ways. You can't be like, the mathematically optimal thing to do against Lodiva is to take the throw most of the time, right? I promise it's not grapple propaganda. I mean, we just did the math, right? The optimal thing to do is to take the throw most of the time if you don't have any other information to go on. You can't do that here. You have to play suboptimally. You have to do that 50-50 random guessing game we were talking about earlier that leads to you on average taking about twice as much damage. You have to do that because you no longer have that cushion of HP to rely on, right? So this is a great example of taking game state into account. There's also an example of this in a Soares video recently. Where actually let's actually flip the script here a little bit. Let's set Soares to max or close to max. I was around like I had a scenario with a Belial recently in a match, right? That looked something like this, right? Pretend Lodiva is Belial here for a second. Right, but I was the Soares. I had the Belial in the corner. Right, he had like no HP left. I had almost all of my HP, and he got a little bit of a hit on me, so I was blocking. Right, but I had a huge HP advantage. I had a huge screen position advantage. He was in the corner and I wasn't. I think we had about equal brave points. He might have had 1 more than me, and we both had equal meter. We both had 100 meter. Right, so in this case, you know what I did is I DP'd him to try and take my turn back. Now, based on what we have just talked about, right? Can you tell me why that was a horrible thing to do? Right. It was actually, he had even less health. The important for this is the DP, had it hit, would have killed him, right? He would have, Lodiva has a little bit more health, but I think even now if she gets hit by this, I think she should die if she gets hit by this. Yeah, there you go. So, right, the DP, had it hit, would have killed the Belial, right? But even still, why was this a horrible idea? Why was this just purely indefensible risk reward? Because, how do I describe this? An important thing with taking game state into account is not just, like, we just saw an example of where Soares was horribly behind, so we just have to take risks no matter what. Here, Soares is incredibly ahead. Yes, if this risk works out, he wins. But why the hell would he do this? Right? Because more than likely, Lodiva is now in that situation where even, I mean, Soares doesn't have a straight up 50-50 like Lodiva does, right? But if, you know, if he runs up and then does, like, this is now a mix, right? Is he going to run up and throw you? Is he going to do a delay, right, to try and catch the delay tech? Is he going to, is he going to rock smash you to bait it? Like, this is a scary situation for Lodiva if he just, like, runs up it, right? It's a guessing game. And again, she cannot just be like, I'm going to take the throw. So, more than likely, by just playing much safer Granblue, right, and then you can talk about stuff. We can skip ahead to playing the player for a little bit here. Lodiva is panicking in this situation. She's in the corner. She's got no health. Maybe it's like the last round for the game or something like that, right? So even doing that earlier, that fake safe pressure stuff we were talking about before, right? Something like this. Lodiva is likely to match here because she's scared, right? She's gonna die. She doesn't want to sit here forever. I mean, worst case at this point, we're getting into the point where like you really can't just like chip someone out at this point, right? Like you see this, right? So like Lodiva's just playing safe, basic Granblue is gonna get Soares the win anyway. Right. So why the hell would he DP? And that's why that decision by me in that game, it happened in the heat of moments, right? Sometimes you just make bad decisions when you're under pressure. But that was horrible decision making, exactly because it was an entirely unnecessary risk, right? Now, for example, before, so if we have Lodiva here, her DPing here actually makes a little bit of sense, right? Like she's in a horrible, like right, she's in a horrible situation. Like DPing just as a get off me tool. Yes, if he guesses the DP and he throws me or spot dodges it or jumps it or whatever, I die. But honestly, if I had to sit here, I'd probably also die, right? So suddenly the exact same move is very understandable, very reasonable, or just completely indefensible, like stupid, completely brain dead decision making, depending entirely on the game state. Right, we can't always just take these raw, basic risk-reward calculations and be like, well, on average, you know, a DP will do, you know, it'll do 2,000 damage, and, you know, it'll get blocked maybe 1/4 of the time, and when it gets blocked, it'll take 8,000 damage, but, you know, so overall, the EV is positive, guys, you should DP. No, you can do that, that's fine, that's a basic flowchart for level 0, but you have to take the game state into account, because it's not a minor difference. Lodiva DPing here, understandable. Risky, but understandable. Soares DPing here, completely brain dead. It's like the game state makes it a whole different calculation, right? So that's the basic idea there. And I guess the last thing, right, is a little bit more slippery. It's a little bit harder to get like a concrete example of, right? But taking your opponent into account. Again, we're talking about increasing levels of complexity and of playing the video game, right? Fighting games at the end of the day are a mental game first and foremost. Once everyone knows what their character does, once everyone knows how to, like, you know, hit their combos, once everyone knows, you know, what their game plan is and what their opponent's game plan is, which is all, you know, takes time to learn for sure. That's like sort of where the beginner and intermediate bits start coming in, right? Once you're done with that, fighting games become purely a mind game. So when I say take your opponents into account, what do I mean? Okay, so before we were talking about how, you know, Lodiva, if you taking the throw from Lodiva, right? This just does 2,300 damage, right? So it's better on average, just doing the raw expected value math. Yeah, just get thrown 4 times block 4 times for every 1 time you match is basically the idea, right? Because you can get blocking loses to throw, matching loses to strike. Strike is about 5 times as much damage as throw, so you should just block as many times, or you could block 4 times as often as you match, right? And that'll minimize your expected damage taken as swords. Well, what if you're fighting Lodiva? I have a bad habit of this sometimes. Why I always will go close L, and then grab. Right, like if I do close L, this is kind of like a mental route in my head. The odds that I do grab after this are much higher than the odds that I do strike after this, right? And maybe that's something that you notice. Like maybe you've either played me before, right? We're in tournament and we've played before, and you know that I have habits, right? Or maybe just, you know, we're playing a bit of a longer set, or maybe I'm so predictable that you've noticed it even in a first to 2 on ranked, right? You're like, hey, this guy like more than 50% of the time is doing SPD after close L. Right? Let's take an extreme example just to prove the point. Right? No one actually does this. But let's say, for example, that I am so predictable. I'm completely autopiloting, right? I'm completely flowcharting. And you will meet some people who are close to this, not 100%, but close, right? Where every single time I do close L, every single time I'm gonna SPD after. You just know, right? Like I'm flowcharting so hard, I'm autopiloting so hard that if you see this, you know that at the time it was a little bit off, right? But yeah, you know that SPD is coming, right? Well, suddenly, again, screw the risk reward calculation. There's a 100% chance that jumping works here, right? Because you know 100% of the time I'm gonna do this. So it's not a guessing game anymore. You know that I always throw rock. So like, who cares about rock? Who cares about scissors? There you go. Who cares about scissors? Just always throw paper, right? Because he's always gonna throw rock, right? Of course, again, that's an extreme example. Nobody does the same thing 100% of the time. But you can see now how if you bring this down a little bit, right? Say that again for me. Maybe I do this 70% of the time after close L, right? I throw, and then only about 30% of the time do I like do a far M or something to hit you. Right. So then you can figure out like, okay, well, it's the far M first off. It's not as bad of a starter as a close H. So maybe this does like 9,000 damage instead of 11,000, and this does 2,300, right? And then you basically you're still doing the same risk reward calculation in your head. Maybe not so explicitly, right? Maybe you're not doing the exact. You're not actually crunching the numbers in your head. But you have the basic idea of like, I'm gonna take like 2 or 3 times as much damage for matching here if I get caught by the strike, right? But he's doing the throw twice as often as he's doing the strike, right? So actually here, like, it does kind of, the numbers do work out. Again, if you can't follow this math, don't worry about it. But the numbers do kind of work out to where, okay, I actually should kind of do a 50-50 here. I should mash half the time and block half the time, right? Because my opponent has habits that I've picked up on. Now, of course, you can be wrong on these reads, and sometimes people will purposefully appear to be very predictable in one way and then suddenly just completely shift, right? Like maybe I'll do this the first like 3 times that I do it. I go close L, SPD, right? Close L, SPD. Okay, well again, I'm messing up the timing, but don't worry about it, right? Close L, SPD. And then you know, people tend to think in threes a lot of the times. So you go, okay, this guy's doing it every single time. And then suddenly I'm just doing nothing but this, right? I'm just doing nothing but close L, far M from that point onward, right? Like I can be people can purposely pretend to be predictable and then just completely do something else, right? So it's not a guaranteed thing, and it's usually not this cut and dry, but people have habits, and while it's difficult to find them, it should be your #1 priority when playing anyone, right? Like, again, this is your #1 priority when playing them is not fighting Ladiva, it's fighting Brick. Like, if you're fighting me on ranked, you're not fighting Ladiva, you're fighting Brick. Your #1 priority, if you don't know how I fight, should be to learn it as soon as you possibly can, right? You start with your level 0 flowchart. You start with just like, yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna block 4 times for every 1 time that I mash, because that's what my basic level 1 expected value calculation of just like how much damage I'm gonna take. That's what it tells me to do on defense. But as soon as you can, you need to get off of that, because I probably am not, because well, I said it earlier when we were talking about expected value, I'm thinking this guy knows that it's safer to take the throw, so I'm going to throw him exclusively, for example, right? Or I'm going to condition, or maybe I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm going to condition him to mash. I'm just going to keep throwing forever until he does something, right? So then at that point, maybe your expected value calculation doesn't work out, because I'm not doing 4 and 1, I'm doing like 8 command grabs in a row, and then you just die, right? If you get command grab like 6 times in a row by Ladiva, you just die. You lose an entire round to me just command grabbing you over and over. Possible, right? It's complicated, right? I'm not like there's not a super easy way to figure out people's patterns. That is what fighting games are at the end of the day. Like at a high level, it is about playing the player, right? So I can't just be like, you know, this is exactly how you figure out how someone plays. But it should be your #1 priority, right? And you should get, and the more practice you have thinking about the game in that lens, the better you get at it, right? Because the more knowledge you have of the opponent's character and the situation you're in, and then the more focused you are on, like if you know, it's going to be very hard for you to figure out my patterns if you don't even know the basic idea of like, oh, Ladiva's a character that's built around this 50-50 right here, right? The strike throw mix right here. If you don't know that, you're screwed, right? So character knowledge to that are important. You need to build those up first. But then at that point, you have to start thinking, okay, what am I noticing? What habits am I picking up on? Similar thing with DPs, right? Some people are very DP happy, right? Some people DP all the time. Some people don't. If you watch some of my videos, you'll notice a lot of the times, for example, someone will DP me very early on in the set in like mid-screen, and I'll be like, oh, like well, you know, why am I like, I'll almost be like happy about it, right? Which is weird. I just got hit by a DP, I just lost my turn, right? Why is that? Because I'm like, oh, that tells me a lot. Right, there are ways you can play that reveal a lot of information about your playstyle. There are ways that don't, you know? If you're just doing kind of like relatively safe, like bog standard pressure, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe, like, I can't really tell. But if you do something wild, like if Sora's just pressuring me in the mid-screen here, and like, I mean, I'm not even in the corner, and I just DP his ass, right? Or like if the first time that I have him in this 50-50, right? Instead of doing like the basic stuff, like, oh, maybe I'll command grab, maybe I'll strike him, I like run up and do this, right? Like these sort of really big tells, it's like, oh, this person is like an insane person, right? Like that suddenly is so far out of the more different something is from the norm, the more information is revealed by someone playing in that way, right? So you have to look out for those things. If someone is just playing, I mean, if people, the really good players are very good at remaining inconsistent, right? In the sense that like it's gonna be very like the Ladivas who are better than me, for example, right? Like you know, the Gabagools of the world, the Nothings, the J-Mams, etc., right? I find that when we play in the mirror, I find it very hard to get a read on what they're going to do. It feels like it almost feels like they're playing at random, right? Where they're like, okay, well, he command grabbed me there, and they command grabbed me again, they command grabbed me again, but then he'd strike like 6 times in a row, and that time he did command grab, strike, command grab, strike. Like, where's the pattern? There's no pattern, man. That time he just backed up and baited a DP. Like, what? I haven't DP'd the entire set. Why did he bait it there? Good players will do their best to remain unpredictable, but even with that in mind, you have to take Gamestate into account, because again, it completely changes our risk-reward calculation. If someone is command grabbing all the time, or never, right? Or again, for the more basic example, if someone always does 6XL, right? Or they do it maybe 80% of the time, and then only 10% do they do the frame trap, and then only 10% do they do the walk-up throw, right? Again, suddenly that shifts your risk-reward calculation a ton. So that is a very, very important part of honestly playing fighting games, right? And it is what you should be aiming to try and base your decision making on. The matches where you're going to feel most comfortable are where you can get that read. But again, you build it out like this. When you start the game, you don't say someone you've never played before and you have no idea how they play, and all you know is what their character does. You do the basic flowchart, right? You have your basic offensive flowchart based on your risk reward of your offensive options. You have a basic defensive flowchart based on their risk reward of their character's defensive options and what their character does. Again, that just requires character knowledge, but you can gain that with experience, right? But as soon as you can, you want to switch off of that to reading their habits. And again, taking game state into account is very important, but you can do that from that. Again, it doesn't really require a ton of knowledge about your opponents, though. Again, that's where we can actually combine both here, like I was saying earlier, right? Like, say for example, right, Sora's has me in this situation, and you know that I'm a matchy little boy, right? So maybe you know that, like, you don't have to even do something that's too risky here. If you just sit here and slowly like just take me to chip here, I'm gonna mash eventually and panic, and you can take me out for it, right? Or maybe it's the opposite. You know that I'm going to be super patient because I don't want to get caught mashing on safe pressure, right? So what you're gonna do instead is like, okay, this guy's gonna be super patient. I'm gonna do some dumb stuff. I'm just gonna run up and run up from like full. People do this a lot, right? You'll see this a lot in like tense situations and round enders, right? It's people they'll be like here, right? And like everyone's like it's two characters like full screen neutral skips, for example, right? And they're both kind of walking back and forth, like trying to respect each other's options, right? Whatever. And suddenly someone does this. Right, and they run up from full screen and throw the guy and kill him, and you're like, what the heck? Huh? Were they just asleep? Like, what are you talking about? Right? No. What it was is that person had a read that the other person was looking out for a certain move. Something else was higher on their mental stack, which we can talk about that whole concept in a different video. But the point is that they were, they had a read based on reading their opponent and the game state. That the game state is very tense for this Ladiva right now. She's low on HP. She's in the corner. I have a huge advantage, and I know maybe she's scared of ultimate dash punch because I've been using a lot of ultimate dash punch. So she's sitting there waiting to spot dodge it. So while she's doing that, she's going to be a lot less ready to react to this, right? So that's a good example of like combining, taking game state and our opponent's behavior into account, right? But yeah, I think that just about does it. I feel like I got a little bit jumbled in the middle there, so as usual, I'm going to try and sort of edit this around, cut things around, put things where they need to be to make sure that I got all my points across as I wanted. But yeah, the general idea here, just to sum it up, right, is that fighting games involve a lot of guessing, but even when you have no information at all, those guesses should not be made at random. Even in the worst case scenario where you have no idea what you're doing as far as what the game state is or what your opponent's habits are, you should still be doing expected value calculations of like, how bad is it if I'm wrong here and how good is it if I'm right? Right, and using that to base it off, if nothing else, right? That's what you can find on Dust Loop. You don't need to know anything about your opponent. But then, even more, so even the most basic level, you are not guessing at random ever in fighting games, right? If you're doing that, you're on full tilt. You need to either take a break or just focus up for a second, right? But and then besides that, you actually want to get into these deeper layers of like, what's the game state like? How exactly is like, and this also can vary. The game state, the effect of the game state on the game can vary by character to character, right? Characters like Ladiva, for example, have more health to play with, but they have maybe worse defense. And then also obviously the big thing is taking your opponent's habits into account eventually. Risks are necessary. You have to take risks in fighting games. You can't just sit there and do safe stuff, whether it's on defense or offense forever. You're either going to get nothing done on offense or you're just going to die on defense, right? You have to take risks, but you have to make sure those risks are calculated. Yeah, okay. Well, I hope that that was somewhat... I know for some of you, some of you who are even like on sort of the higher end of intermediate or advanced, this probably wasn't very... higher end of intermediate, lower end of advanced. This probably wasn't super enlightening for you. But for people who are a little bit newer to maybe Granblue's your first fighting game, maybe some of these concepts, like you hear people talk about them a lot, but you don't really understand the sort of inner workings of them. I hope this was useful. Maybe even for some of you more advanced folks, maybe there was like one or two things in there. You're like, oh yeah, right. I didn't think of it that way or something. I hope this was helpful. Basically, is the idea there. I know I got a little bit scatterbrained in the middle there, but also maybe I should have recorded guide videos at midnight, huh? What do you want from me? Sometimes my schedule doesn't work out in the way that I expected to necessarily. But yeah, well, all that being said, that is going to do it for this here video, folks. So as always, before you get going, I got some things for you here before you go on your merry way. Number one, you can obviously, regular YouTuber stuff applies as always. Any sort of likes, subscribes, bells, comments, all that good stuff on this video will be greatly appreciated. It helps a lot in a lot of different ways. I wouldn't ask you guys, wouldn't bother you for it if it didn't make a difference. Obviously, algorithmically, it's a big deal, right? But also, it's good feedback for me, right? If for example, maybe you don't like the way that I explained this. Maybe in general, I wasn't as coherent here as I was in like the corner offense and defense guide. So this video gets less engagement or something. That's good for me. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Let me make sure that I, try and talk more like this, and less like this. People like this more. People found this more helpful. People found this more useful. Maybe the topic itself wasn't as useful. Things like that, right? It's good for me. I want to make things that you guys want to watch and get value out of at the end of the day, and you can help me know what those things are, whether with feedback, whether it's positive or negative, right? Besides that, there's also a link in the description down there if you want to go and join my Discord server. It's a nice place. You can hang out, learn about Granblue, learn about fighting games in general, but also people talk about card games, Relink, Elden Ring, art, music, gacha games, whatever you want in there. So it's also a good place to make some friends, hopefully. So I encourage you to join, but just be nice. We have like 600 plus people in there, and they're all great because the ones who aren't got shot in the head immediately. So yeah, I mean, if you're gonna go in there and be a dick, don't bother. I'm just gonna shoot you. So if you're gonna be there, just be nice, man. It's that hard to treat people like people. Come on. There's also a link downstairs there if you want to go and check out my Twitch. I should be streaming actually the day that you watch this. Not right now, but you know, if you're watching this when it came out, like 3 hours from now or something, I'll be streaming. But yeah, if you want to come by and hang out, I think you'll have a good time. Otherwise, you can certainly just go over there, drop a follow. That'd be greatly appreciated. With all that being said, most importantly, hope you guys had a great time. And actually, because this was more of an educational video, I hope you guys found this somewhat helpful. You know, I think it's some good stuff in here. It's more so I wonder how well I articulated it, but it's all good. It's all good. Regardless, having a lot of fun with Granblue, and there's going to be a lot more coming your way. But until then, I will see you in the next one. Peace.